One quick note before we get into it. I wanted to show a piece of artwork I got when I went to Faithless Forum. It was drawn by this awesome kid who I got to meet at the hotel. I hope to see a lot more art from them next year at Faithless Forum. They're on their way to a real, promising career, based on what I saw in their book. So keep drawing, and if you comment below, I'll pin it as a top comment so I can give credit for it. I was working on a spirit science video the other day, and I started thinking about how strange some of their beliefs were. I got to thinking, is it really much stranger than any other religious belief? I mean, think about it. Some of the stuff we believed as children was really, really strange. How did we ever buy that stuff? Let's take a look at my list of top 5 strangest religious beliefs. Let's get into it. These aren't all Christian beliefs, so there'll almost certainly be some on there that you've never believed. As I go through these, notice how you feel about them. Then compare that to how you feel about things that you do or at least did believe. For example, the story of Samson. A guy couldn't cut his hair or he'd lose his strength, he held up buildings. These ideas are all roughly equivalent, though some are admittedly stranger than others. Even so, they're all in the same ballpark. As we go through the list, bear in mind that it isn't necessarily in any particular order. These are just really strange independently of each other. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. Space aliens are gonna pick us up in their spaceship and fly us to heaven, but they need $5 US per person for space fare. If you guys watch my channel regularly, you'll probably recognize this one as something the Heaven's Gate cult believed, from the 1970s to the 1990s when they died. There were 39 of them, and they believed that space aliens were going around abducting people. They thought that they had the souls of space aliens, and they inhabited human bodies until the day they could go back to heaven, which is a physical location, and the only way to reach it is by UFO. In 1996, the Hale-Bopp comet was about to pass by Earth, and their leader, who went by Doe, claimed there was a spaceship following close behind it, ready to pick them up and take them to the evolutionary level above human, aka the kingdom of God. Unfortunately, by the end of it, he believed that he had to leave his human vehicle to get there. All 39 people had to physically leave their bodies. They were found in their mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, March 27, 1996. It's a real shame. But who knows, maybe they're looking down on us from the next evolutionary level above human now. Number 4. Scientology. I was gonna give it a short, catchy description, but honestly, there's entirely too much to cover in a single sentence. Something that makes Scientology unique is the fact that it's more of a psychology cult than a religious cult, though it does have religious elements to it. The crazy part is their quote-unquote creation myth. Most religions have one of those, but Scientology's story of how we got here on Earth gets very strange. Let me just give a brief recap of how Scientology works. It was created by a guy named L. Ron Hubbard. He wrote a book called Dianetics, and it was what he believed to be a revolutionary breakthrough in the field of psychology. The idea behind the book is that you've got something called a reactive mind and an analytical mind. Of course, in real psychology, things aren't broken up that way. But in Scientology, Hubbard said that the reactive mind is the unconscious part of your mind that's responsible for most illnesses. So if you get your reactive mind under control, then you'll never get sick. It's called going clear. That's why they say people who go clear can do things like control things with their mind and they never get sick. They make lots of lofty claims about their religion, easily testable and falsifiable claims. I mean, we can monitor somebody who reaches the level of clear in the religion and see if they get sick like everybody else. And surprise, they do. Anyways, part of the method behind getting your reactive mind under control is going through audit sessions, where you tell somebody every intimate detail of your life, start to finish, everything. They write it all down and send it off to Scientology headquarters. And once you've detailed your life start to finish, you start detailing what happened in past lives. They kind of believe in this whole reincarnation bit. So here's where it gets interesting. L. Ron Hubbard described his own past life, and that's the weird belief I wanted to address with Scientology. This information isn't available to anybody under a level called OT3. They have a ranking system, and it takes lots and lots of time and money to advance up the ranks. From my understanding, reaching OT3 costs about $400,000. They say that if you hear it without going through all the steps to become OT3, you'll do what's called freewheeling, where you're completely insane and can't get a grip on reality. That's how sensitive this information is. L. Ron Hubbard wrote this stuff down himself, and Scientology puts it in briefcases and they give it out to OT3s. You can see a lot of Hubbard's own fears in the story, like the fear of the IRS because he wasn't paying taxes, for example. But I won't get ahead of myself. Let me tell the story, and let's hope nobody freewheels from it. Lord Xenu ruled over a confederation of 76 planets 75 million years ago. They had an overpopulation problem. Each planet had about 178 billion people. To solve the population problem, he called in billions of people for income tax inspections, but when they arrived, they were injected with alcohol and glycol to paralyze them. Then they were put into planes that looked exactly like DC-8s, except they had rockets instead of propellers. Then they were flown to Earth and stacked around the bases of 10 volcanoes, at which point they placed hydrogen bombs all around them. Then Xenu detonated all the hydrogen bombs at the same time and they all died. The souls of those people are still floating around. They're called thetans, and when a baby is born, they all attach to and inhabit the baby. After going clear, i.e. after your reactive mind is under control, it's your job to basically exorcise the thetans from your body. So there's Scientology's whole premise. But like I said, that information isn't made available to anybody below a certain ranking in Scientology. So if you ask the standard Scientologist, of which there are around 40,000, they probably won't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I hope I didn't make anybody freewheel with that information. Number 3. Bigfoot sightings are actually sightings of Cain. That's from the Mormons. One of the early Mormon apostles, David Patton, claimed to meet Cain. Here's a quote from a letter that a man named Abraham Smoot wrote to Joseph Smith in 1893. It was in reference to a story that David Patton told Smoot. While I was riding my mule back to your home, I met with a very remarkable personage who had represented himself as being Cain, who had murdered his brother Abel. I suddenly noticed a very strange personage walking beside me. For about 2 miles, his head was about even with my shoulders as I sat on my saddle. He wore no clothing, but he was covered with hair. His skin was very dark, and he said that he had no home, that he was a wanderer on earth. He said that he was a very miserable creature, that he had earnestly sought death, but that he could not die, and his mission was to destroy the souls of men. I rebuked him in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by virtue of the holy priesthood, and commanded him to go hence, and he immediately departed out of my sight. From that letter, a lot of Mormons came to believe that the dude met Bigfoot, and that Bigfoot is Cain. It's more of a superstition than a codified belief, but apparently it almost became doctrine at one point. That brings us nicely into point number 2. You can't shop at yard sales because something you buy might have a demon attached to it. Jehovah's Witnesses. As far as I know, this one isn't really doctrine either, but I remember when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I had a friend named Derek. We were both kids, like 9 or 10 years old, and every year, they'd have a yard sale in his little apartment complex. So every apartment would set up tables and sell stuff. It was actually a pretty fun thing. You'd mostly see cool little knickknacks and doodads and whatnots, but I was cautioned to be very careful who I bought from. If the person had a questionable history, or if there were questionable items on the table, I wasn't supposed to buy from them. Demons might be attached to objects. They'd even tell really convincing stories, like somebody bought something from a yard sale once and all of their cabinet doors were open when they woke up the next morning. If you think that's crazy, just wait for me to tell you the Smurf story. I was going to talk about the belief in Islam that you have to repeat a phrase to protect yourself from demons that hide in your toilet, but after that last point, I feel obligated to tell you the Smurf story. I'll tell you the toilet one in another video, so keep a lookout for part 2. So here's number 1, the Smurf story. Almost every Jehovah's Witness has heard the Smurf story at some point in their lives. I heard about it when I was little, and it sounded so bizarre to me that I just viewed it as an urban legend and moved on. It wasn't until years later when I heard it again that I realized that it was a real thing that Jehovah's Witnesses really believe. So here's the story I heard. I was told that somebody had a stuffed Smurf doll at the Kingdom Hall one day, and the doll came to life and wandered down the aisle swearing and saying all kinds of profane things, walked out the door, and was never seen again. Really strange story, right? I didn't buy it when I was like 6 years old, and that's why I was so surprised to find that basically every Jehovah's Witness I knew had heard a similar story. Some people heard that a Smurf climbed out of a storybook, some said the Smurf changed into a demon and disappeared, different versions of the story all over the place. But there's really no way to know the origins of the story for sure. I've heard lots of explanations of where it came from, but none of them are really substantiated. I mean, can anybody really substantiate an urban legend like that? I decided to take a look at some of the other versions of the story I've heard. I just went through some ex-Jehovah's Witness message boards and found a few. Here's one description. A young child went to the Jehovah's Witness convention with his parents. The child brought a stuffed little blue demon that worldly people called Smurfs. The stuffed Smurf got up in the middle of the assembly and walked out the door. The demon inside the stuffed toy couldn't take the light and truth inside the assembly hall and had to get out. Here's another. The Smurf walked out of the purse during the opening song and went down the aisle and out the door yelling, "I can't take this shit." I can't even imagine how this story took root or why people actually believed it, but this is the world we live in. Okay, that's all I've got for you guys. YouTube has really been fucking me with recommending my channel and monetization, so if you guys want to ensure that I can keep doing the work I do, then it would be greatly appreciated if you supported me. As I mentioned before, there are a few different ways. First, you can support me through Patreon. You get early access to my videos, and you also get access to my Patreon Discord server. I pop in there from time to time and talk to people. Second, you can support me by checking out my Teespring store. I've been trying to put a shirt out there for each religion I've covered, but if you guys have any good ideas for shirt designs, then feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll take a look through. And third, you can support me through PayPal. There aren't any perks with this one, but I know some people aren't the biggest fans of Patreon, so you can do it that way if you want. Don't forget to check out Facebook, where you also get to see my videos early. And don't forget about the podcast. I'm pretty much unfiltered on the podcast. You can find links to all this stuff in the description of the video, so give it a look. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.